My name is Margaret Benson. I'm 58 years old. Not long ago, my husband turned to me, looked me right in the face, and said I wasn't pretty enough to come with him that night. He was dressed sharp, already halfway to the door, and I stood there in the hallway, still in heels, makeup set, hair curled. I didn't ask him to explain. I didn't cry or argue. I just nodded once and let him leave. The front door closed softly, but the sound echoed like a door slamming shut in my chest. I stood there for what felt like forever. Not quite breathing, just staring into the mirror by the staircase. My lipstick still matched my dress. My pearl earrings caught the hallway light like I'd planned. I thought I looked nice. Not glamorous, maybe, but good enough. Presentable. But his words stuck. Not pretty enough? Not enough. I stayed in that mirror too long. Like I was trying to see what he saw, or maybe what he stopped seeing. I wasn't angry. I was hollow. Not from the insult itself, but from the fact that it didn't even shock me. Somewhere deep inside, a part of me had expected it. That was the worst part. The quiet knowing. The way I didn't fight. That night, I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt erased. I took off my heels one at a time, walked back into the living room, and sat down without turning on a single light. The roast I had made went cold. My clutch still sat unopened on the table. I lied to my daughter that night, when she asked how it went. Said I wasn't feeling up to it. That was the moment it started. The unraveling. And also, somehow, the return. I met Daniel when I was 27. Just a few months into my job teaching English at a public high school outside Cleveland. He came in as a guest speaker for a tech firm, pitching software to the district board. He was confident, but not pushy. Remembered people's names, and smiled like he actually meant it. After the meeting, we talked in the hallway about books. Of all things, I told him I loved Austen and Morrison. He said anyone who liked Jane Eyre probably didn't tolerate fools. And that made me laugh more than it should have. We started dating a week later. He brought coffee to my classroom after school, stayed late while I graded essays, and once helped me hang a crooked bulletin board that refused to stay straight. 11 months after that first meeting, we were married in my sister's backyard, under a canopy of cheap string lights and early fall leaves. Our cake was leaning to one side, and the champagne was warm. But we danced until the grass beneath us turned to mud. I wore my mother's old pearl earrings, and he kissed my cheek every few minutes like he still couldn't believe. I said yes. We moved into a modest house with peeling paint and a stubborn patch of weeds out front that never gave up no matter how many Saturdays we spent out there digging. In those early years, we worked like a team. I brought home piles of essays. He read the funny lines out loud while I cooked dinner. He was climbing the ladder in his firm, one conference at a time, but always came home with a new story, a new idea, a new compliment meant just for me. There were struggles, of course. Sleepless nights with sick kids. Tight months when the water heater broke the same week the car wouldn't start. But we had a rhythm, a shared sense that we were building something together, even if the pieces were sometimes uneven. Looking back now, I can't say when the shift started. It wasn't one argument or a major change. It was quieter than that. Like dust settling on bookshelves. Like shoes slowly moving farther apart on the closet floor. We still talked. Still ate dinner at the same table. But the little gestures faded. He stopped reading essays out loud. I stopped asking him what he thought of the new bulletin board in my classroom. And somewhere between packed lunches and bedtime stories, we forgot to check in. We forgot to look. I think we both believed the foundation was strong enough to hold without maintenance. But love, I've learned, doesn't always break. Sometimes it just wears thin. So thin, You don't even notice it's gone until you reach for it and find nothing but air. It was one of those rooftop cocktail events downtown. Daniel's company had just landed a major account, and they were celebrating with clients, executives, and just enough wine to keep the small talk flowing. He asked me to come, almost offhandedly, like it was something he remembered at the last minute. I wore the dark green silk dress he used to love. Spent too long, curling my hair just right. Trying to remind myself, I still knew how to show up well. When we arrived, Daniel slipped easily into his usual charm. All handshakes and quick laughter. I stayed close, like I always had. Smiling, nodding, chiming in when it made sense. A group formed around us. 2 younger associates, his VP, and one woman I hadn't met before. She introduced herself as Samantha Ellis. She was poised, sharp, with the kind of calm confidence that fills a room without asking for permission. Someone asked Daniel how long we'd been married, and he laughed. Said too long to count. They chuckled politely. I did too, though something in my chest pinched a little. Then Samantha turned to me and asked what I did. I opened my mouth to answer. I was about to tell her I'd been teaching for over 30 years, that I worked with new teachers, helped shape district policy, still volunteered on literacy initiatives. But before I could speak, Daniel cut in. Said I taught part-time now. Mostly did volunteer work. Kept myself busy. He didn't look at me. He didn't mean it cruelly. It was just a quick deflection. A redirect. Back to business. Back to him. I stood there with my lips still parted. The words stuck somewhere between my throat and my pride. Samantha looked at me and gave the smallest nod. Her voice was softer when she said that kind of work often matters most. I smiled on cue. But my hands felt cold. I don't remember much after that. The music played. Glasses clinked. Someone complimented my earrings. And I thanked them like I was on autopilot. I kept pretending, kept smiling, but I felt something in me go dim, like a lamp switched off in a room full of noise. Daniel didn't notice. He moved through conversations like I wasn't there. Not unkind. Just indifferent. Like a man who'd walked that hallway so many times. He stopped seeing the pictures on the walls. That night, in the back of the cab, I looked out the window and stayed silent. When we got home, I kicked off my heels and stared at them a while before putting them back in the box. He asked if I was tired. I nodded. But the truth is, I didn't feel tired. I felt erased. Not insulted. Not attacked. Just quietly removed from the story we were supposed to be writing together. That's what made it so painful. Not the words, but the absence. Not the anger, but the air. That night didn't end with a fight. It didn't end at all. It just drifted away. Like I did. Still standing in the same place. Still holding the same glass. Just no longer seen. After that rooftop night, I kept trying to smooth things over in ways so small, they were almost invisible. I made his favorite roast the next week. Set the table with candles. Even chilled the wine he used to like. He came home late. Ate in silence. Then went straight to his laptop, without saying much at all. I tried not to read into it. Told myself he was tired. That work was pulling at him in ways I couldn't see. But something in his tone had changed. He stopped asking how my day was. And when I offered it anyway, he'd just nod without really hearing it. One morning, I stood in the kitchen, holding up 2 ties for him to choose from. One was navy with subtle stripes. The other burgundy and clean. I asked which one he wanted to wear. He didn't look up. Just said it didn't matter and walked out of the room. I stayed there holding both ties. Staring at them, like they were a question I didn't know how to answer anymore. It wasn't about the ties. It was about being erased from the rituals that once made us feel like a team. He used to tell me stories when he got home. Now he walked in talking on the phone and stayed that way until he closed the bedroom door. If I interrupted, he'd raise a finger without looking up. Not to scold. Just to pause me, like background noise that could wait. The silence wasn't loud. It was casual. Constant. It filled the space between us with a quiet I didn't know how to name. We still shared the same house. The same meals. The same bed. But it felt like I was slowly becoming part of the furniture. Helpful. Convenient. Unremarkable. There were no fights. No harsh words. Just 100 missed chances to care. 1,000 tiny ways to say, without saying, that I no longer mattered. And the worst part wasn't the hurt. It was the fact that I had started to accept it. I had started moving around the silence like it was normal. Like I deserved to be set aside gently. Without fuss. That kind of betrayal doesn't leave bruises. It leaves absence. And it teaches you how to shrink without even noticing you're getting smaller. The night of the executive banquet. I told Daniel I wasn't feeling well, and watched him leave in a tuxedo I had steamed earlier that day. He didn't ask again if I wanted to come. He just straightened his cufflinks and left. Like it was already decided. But I couldn't sit still. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was missing the way he used to reach for me in a crowd. Or maybe it was the silence that had grown too heavy. I got dressed without saying a word. I chose a black blouse with a satin neckline and a skirt I hadn't worn in years. My hands shook while doing my makeup. But I did it anyway. I parked 2 blocks away and walked to the hotel. The lobby was warm and full of voices. I didn't check in. I didn't go inside. I stood in the hallway outside the ballroom, pretending to look at my phone. Waiting for something I couldn't name. Then I saw him. Daniel stood near the bar. Smiling. Glass in hand. Surrounded by colleagues. He looked relaxed. Familiar? Like the version of him I used to know. Then I saw her. Samantha Ellis. She approached with that same graceful energy and asked if I was coming tonight. Her voice was warm. She looked around like she expected me to walk in any minute. Daniel chuckled. Said I wasn't really comfortable with these kinds of events anymore. Said I got overwhelmed. You know how women get? He added. The group laughed gently. Samantha didn't. She blinked slowly and changed the subject. I stood just beyond the archway. Invisible, but listening. And in that moment, I felt something sharp and unfamiliar run through me. It wasn't anger. It was recognition. He hadn't just left me out. He had rewritten me. I wasn't the woman who helped him prep for every talk, who ironed his shirts and proofread his slides. I wasn't the teacher with 30 years of experience, or the woman who knew every name in the school district. I was now fragile. Fussy. Embarrassing. Maybe. An absence explained away with charm. The worst part wasn't what he said. It was how easily it came out. As if that version of me had always been the truth. As if I had quietly folded myself away and he had simply filled in the blanks. I turned and walked back to the elevator. Into the garage. Into my car. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there with the engine off. Hands on the wheel. Staring at the glow of the dashboard. Not from rage. From the weight of being rewritten by someone who once swore he knew me better than anyone. That night didn't break me. But it showed me, finally, that I wasn't losing something. I had already lost it. And what was left wasn't partnership. It was performance. One I was no longer willing to play along with. A few weeks after the banquet, I decided to clean out the guest room closet. Not because I was looking for anything. Just because I needed to move. My hands needed something to do. Something other than folding the same napkins or refilling the sugar jar. Boxes lined the top shelf. Most of them untouched for years. Old tax forms. Travel brochures. Cables. No one remembered the purpose of. I opened one marked Daniel, work. It was full of manila folders, labeled neatly in his handwriting. In the middle of them, an unsealed envelope caught my eye. My name was on it. Margaret Benson. That alone made me pause. Inside was a handwritten note. Cream-colored paper with soft blue ink. The signature at the bottom was unmistakable. Samantha Ellis. It was dated 6 years earlier. She had written to thank Daniel for his presentation. Said it was clear, engaging, polished. Then came the line that made my fingers tremble. She wrote that it was obvious I had helped with the preparation, and that my touch elevated the whole thing. She thanked me, called me an asset, said the entire team had noticed. I read it once. Then again. I sat down on the edge of the bed and let the words soak in. I remembered that night so clearly. Daniel had been pacing the living room, frustrated with the way his speech flowed. I stayed up with him for hours, reshuffling bullet points, cutting filler, even rewriting his closing paragraph while he dictated half sentences out loud. When he came home the next day, he only said it went fine. No mention of Samantha. No mention of the letter. He had filed it away, like it meant nothing. But it meant everything to me. It was proof. Proof that I hadn't imagined my value. That I hadn't been invisible all along. Someone had seen me. And not just anyone. Someone sharp. Someone who noticed the kind of work that usually goes unthanked. I didn't leave the letter out. I didn't confront Daniel. I didn't even mention I had found it. I placed it in my own desk drawer, tucked between old journals and a broken fountain pen. Not to use as a weapon, but to keep as a reminder that I mattered. That I had always mattered. That note didn't fix everything, but it gave me a beginning. A quiet, steady breath in a life that had felt stifled for too long. And from that breath, I started again. Not loudly. Not publicly. But truthfully, the first thing I changed was my coffee. For years, I made it the way Daniel liked it. 2 sugars. Splash of milk. But one morning, I brewed it dark and strong with a pinch of cinnamon. The way I used to when I lived alone. I took it out to the porch, wrapped in a shawl, and watched the steam rise in the cold morning air. It wasn't about the coffee. It was about choosing something for myself. Just me. No compromise. That cup felt like a quiet declaration I hadn't realized I needed. Later that week, I pulled down an old box from the attic. Inside were stacks of journals. Spiral-bound notebooks. Loose pages folded over at the corners. I had filled them in my 30s and 40s. Sometimes in bed before sleep. Sometimes sitting in the car after work. They were filled with half-finished poems. Classroom memories. Pieces of thought I didn't want to forget. I picked out one with a navy cover and a cracked spine. Flipping through it, I saw someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time. She was bold. Curious. Unfiltered. A little tired. Maybe. But still full of spark. That night, I opened a fresh notebook and wrote 3 lines. I have given too much without asking for enough. I am not broken. I am still here. I didn't show it to anyone. It wasn't for show. It was for me. Like watering something buried deep that had been waiting patiently to bloom again. The next week, I created a simple online profile offering editing services, college essays, resumes, business bios. It wasn't much, but I liked the feeling of being needed for something I was good at. Ramona, an old friend I hadn't spoken to in a year, I helped me set it up. She asked what had changed. I said I think I finally heard myself again. I opened a new checking account in my name and rerouted my small pension payments. I transferred ownership of the cabin my parents left me into a trust. Just mine. I didn't ask permission. I didn't announce it. I just did it. Daniel started noticing. One morning, as I adjusted a burgundy scarf in the mirror before heading out to meet a client, he looked at me and said, "I'd been putting more effort into my look lately." I turned to him and smiled. "I'm putting effort into myself." He didn't know what to say. Maybe he didn't want to ask the question whose answer might unseat everything he'd come to count on. That silence used to hurt me. Now, it just felt like space I could breathe in. I started cooking meals I liked. Roasted vegetables, lentil soup, warm bowls with fresh herbs. If he asked why I wasn't eating with him, I simply said I already did. No apology. No reason. It didn't feel like I was leaving him. It felt like I was coming back to me. Bit by bit. Step by step. In my own name. In my own time. And with each quiet choice, I felt the edges of myself becoming sharper again. Not bitter. Just clear. The envelope arrived on a Thursday morning. Cream-colored. Thick paper. The kind that feels deliberate in your hands. The return address bore the logo of Daniel's company. But it was addressed to me. Inside was a handwritten invitation. Samantha Ellis was hosting an executive appreciation dinner and had personally requested my presence. She wrote that my past contributions hadn't gone unnoticed. That line stayed with me. I held the card for a long time before placing it on my nightstand. I didn't tell Daniel. I RSVP'd the same day and circled the date quietly on the calendar. On the night of the event, I stood in front of the mirror in a long black dress with a satin neckline. Ramona helped pin my hair back just enough to frame my face. I wore silver earrings. Subtle but strong. I looked like someone I hadn't seen in a while. And I liked her. Daniel walked in just as I was fastening my bracelet. He paused. Clearly surprised. Asked if I was going somewhere. I told him I was. The executive dinner. His eyes narrowed slightly. He asked if I got invited. I said I did. Samantha asked for me by name. He stood there, searching for something to say. I didn't fill the silence. I just smiled softly and picked up my clutch. "I'll see you there," I said, and walked out before he could respond. At the venue, the lighting was warm and the music low. Samantha spotted me near the welcome table and came over with open arms. She told me I looked stunning, that she was so glad I came. She led me to a table near the front, and my name was already printed next to hers. When Daniel walked in 20 minutes later, his eyes scanned the room until they landed on me. And for the first time in years, he didn't look like someone standing beside him. I looked like someone who belonged exactly where she was. The room was filled with soft conversation and the quiet clinking of glassware. I stood near the side of the stage, holding my note cards, though I didn't really need them. Samantha gave me a gentle nod as the host introduced me. The applause was polite as I walked to the podium, but I felt every step like a promise to myself. From the stage, the lights dimmed the crowd, but I could still make out familiar faces. And then I saw him, Daniel, standing near the back, hands in his pockets, watching. He didn't smile. Neither did I. I took a breath and looked out across the room. I began by telling them what I used to believe. That love meant stepping aside. That support meant silence. That the way to show care was to take up less space so someone else could shine. I said I was proud to be behind the scenes once, until I realized I had disappeared from my own story. That I had traded presence for permission. That I had confused loyalty with invisibility. The room fell still. I let the silence stretch. Not out of nerves, but because it finally felt like mine. I told them that I hadn't needed to shout to find my voice again. I just needed to stop waiting for someone else to hand it back to me. I looked down at my notes, then folded them in half and set them aside. I ended by saying, we don't have to be loud to be powerful. And we never need permission to matter. When I stepped back from the podium, the applause came slowly at first. Then stronger. Not loud, but real. The kind of sound that reaches deeper than noise. I stepped down from the stage and moved toward the edge of the room. Daniel was waiting there. He looked at me like he wanted to say something. Like he had questions he'd never thought to ask before. But I didn't stop. I didn't need to. I passed him gently, nodding once. The way you do when you no longer owe anyone an explanation. That speech wasn't for him. It was for the woman I used to be. And the ones still sitting quietly at tables, wondering when it's their turn to be seen. One Saturday afternoon, Maggie came over with her son and a stack of photo albums I hadn't touched in years. We sat at the kitchen table flipping through pages worn soft at the edges, stopping now and then to laugh at crooked birthday cakes or uneven bangs. Then she turned to a photo I hadn't seen in a long time. It was me in Paris, holding a baguette, laughing so hard my eyes were almost closed. My hair was windblown, and my scarf was slipping off one shoulder. I didn't look polished, but I looked alive. Maggie touched the picture and said, "You seem alive again, Mom." Her words settled into me deeper than I expected. Deeper than any apology Daniel never gave. Deeper than any compliment I had gone years without hearing. Because they weren't about how I looked. They were about how I felt. And how I finally looked like myself again. That picture reminded me of a version of me that had never truly left. She had just been waiting. I didn't have to leave my home or raise my voice to find her. I only had to stop asking for someone else to see her first. I had to look in the mirror and recognize her for myself. To any woman listening who feels invisible or small or quietly erased, I want you to hear me when I say this. You are not gone. You are not broken. You are still here. Maybe softer. Maybe cuter. But still full of life that matters. You don't have to wait for permission. You just have to begin by choosing yourself. If this story felt familiar or made you feel seen, I hope you'll like, share, or leave a comment. Sometimes, one voice can help another find her way back. And that, more than anything, is how we begin again. Together,